Welcome to Politics NY with Sky lifting the curtain. I'm Schneps Media, and we are lifting the curtain behind the scenes of city government and politics. And right now I have Eric Phillips with me. He spent 4 years in the Blasio administration as the press secretary. So he was in charge of the sound bites and the news and everything that went on for the majority of the mayoralty of Mayor de Blasio. And now he is a senior vice president at Edelman PR, where he does crisis communication. So he has experience in that from being press secretary. So Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Sky.
Yeah, of course. So let's dive into it. How are you? And tell us what's going on.
I'm good. As you can see, or maybe see your viewers, I'm in the office, which feels good. There's not many of us here, but slowly people are coming back to their desks and getting more and more used to sort of how it used to feel. But I think it's going to take a little while. But for me personally, it feels good to be back in a desk and seeing colleagues and feeling some level of normalcy at work. I know.
And now the crisis communications you're dealing with now, is anything government related?
A lot of clients have pieces of their problems that interact with the government, whether it's with the federal government, state government, or city hall, or somebody at a council or something like that. So it's not directly government related. We don't do any government contracting or political campaigns or anything like that, but there's a political piece to a lot of the challenges that my crisis clients are facing, whether they're in New York here, whether they're global clients dealing with jurisdictions in other parts of the world. It all kind of relates, right? And we're in this pandemic mode where everybody is sort of figuring out how to get their people back to work, and also still figuring out what the future of work looks like in their offices, and figuring out this very delicate and tense moment in sort of American history and culture right now from a societal and justice perspective that everybody's trying to navigate at the same time. So it's been a really complicated last year or two for everybody, including the people in this building.
Right. And now with, all eyes were on the city, and now with Eric Adams looking like he's going to be the next mayor of New York City, what do you think of that?
I think it was a great choice by New York City voters. I think he's got a long track record of real pragmatic experience and jobs and solutions on some tough issues. And certainly the city is going to face those in the years ahead. I also think he represents a new era of democratic politics in a way. While he came from perhaps some conventional sort of pathway, I think he represents a new face and sort of a new perspective, certainly to the business community, certainly to people who are worried about crime, certainly to people who are worried about office reopenings and worry about places like Midtown and other commercial corridors that we have to breathe new life into. I think they feel like they're probably going to have a seat at the table in an Adams administration, and maybe they haven't felt that way in a while. So that's a good thing for New York City. I think we need everybody at the table, whether it's small businesses or big businesses in these large buildings that have sat empty for the last year. So whether it's public safety or whether it's jobs or whether it's getting people back into the office, I think Eric Adams is probably a good sign for all of those things.
Yeah, because a lot of people really did not like your guy, Mayor de Blasio.
Listen, that happens with any mayor. I think a lot of people, listen, he was twice elected pretty easily. I think he would have done well had the law allowed him to run for a third term, frankly.
You think so?
I do think so. You can't listen and absorb only what's on Twitter and what's on sort of these elite political chatting communities. You gotta go to the people, and a lot of the people that elected Bill de Blasio elected Eric Adams. Their coalitions looked a lot alike. And whether you look at de Blasio's record or whether you look at how much he's given to the city over the last 8 years, I think history will reflect him a lot better than we're reflecting him in this moment, probably.
You think so? Listen, he was reelected with what, 9% of the vote?
No, he was widely elected public advocate and then twice widely elected mayor. I mean, and none of the Democrats that ran this year ran against him 4 years ago, because they knew he was strong and they knew he was in a good place and that the city was in the right trajectory and that he was a good steward for what was going on. It's a tough job. They ran Bloomberg out of town after 3 terms. I mean, it's after you're in the job for a while, people have complaints. We're New Yorkers.
Remind us, were you still working with the mayor when he ran for president?
I left right before he ran for president.
Did you know that was coming?
I didn't. I mean, like everybody else, I sort of saw the writing on the wall. I think everybody suspected he was interested in that, but it wasn't something I was involved in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now about the city dynamic, right? You were there and Mayor de Blasio is more progressive. Corey Johnson as the speaker is more progressive, and Scott Stringer was, I don't know if he was playing the progressive card or the moderate card at the time. But what do you think of this dynamic going into it? If we're going to have a more moderate Eric Adams mayor and a more progressive controller, and what do you think how that will play out?
And I think we'll probably have a more progressive city council too. Whether regardless of who's elected speaker, I think the city council broadly will be more progressive and continue to sort of inch left. I think it'll be a real tension when it comes to public safety, when it comes to ULURP and land use issues and the development of affordable housing in neighborhoods and rezonings and things like that. I think you're actually going to see more tension than ever before on those kinds of things. And listen, those were real battles during the de Blasio administration, when city hall's politics looked a lot like the city council politics, frankly. I think you'll probably see a little more centrism out of city hall than we've seen in a little bit. And I think you'll see a little more progressivism from the council, which means there's going to be this sort of natural clash when it comes to big time development of affordable housing and rezonings in some of these neighborhoods that that'll see a lot of focus, I think. So I think it'll be, I don't think it'll be hand in glove necessarily governance. I think there's going to be some tension.
Oh, that doesn't sound that good.
It's, there's two different perspectives of the world, and frankly the city council members should have that attitude in some moments about development in their districts, and frankly the mayor should have the attitude of, we've got to come around on a whole scale sort of citywide policy for how to create affordable housing we don't have. So the tension isn't inherently bad. I think it's kind of natural, actually.
Now, is your office in Midtown?
We're downtown. We're in Hudson Square, which is some new fake fancy term for like just north of Canal and Tribeca.
I don't know if the Hudson Square bid would like to hear that it's a fake fancy.
No real person I've ever heard actually use the term besides the
But back to Midtown, because a lot of big offices like your office are in Midtown Manhattan. What do you think is the future of Midtown Manhattan, knowing that a lot of people that work in big offices like you do don't want to come into the office, or even employers have told their employees that they don't have to come in 5 days a week anymore? So what's going to happen with all this office space?
I tend to think that more people will end up coming back to the office than we think at this moment, right? Like 6 months ago, or maybe a year ago, everybody said, man, nobody's going back to those big buildings. And then a couple of months ago, people started to trickle back. And now people are saying, well, I bet they come back half time, or a certain amount of employees come back 3 days a week, or something like that. And there's flexible working spaces. So 6 months from now, I think you'll see even more people sick of their apartments, sick of commuting, or sick of a lack of seeing people on their commutes and seeing their coffee vendor and seeing their pals at lunch and things like that. And I think people will start to go back into. I think people in some of these big buildings will go in 5 days a week like they used to. There'll be some people that won't, and we're going to have to convert and figure out how to rescale some of that real estate, probably to be more flexible and to account for those kind of schedules and those kind of workflows. But you also think about transit. What does it mean for the Long Island Railroad? What does it mean for Metro North? What does it mean for these major arteries of transit and infrastructure that we've built for people coming to the office 5 days a week in the Midtown, and some of whom now may not? So I think there's a lot of things to think about, but I don't think it's going to be as radical. A couple of years from now, I don't think we will see as radical of a change as we may think is happening right now.
Even with this more progressive council that could take it in a radical direction.
There's always, the council can only do so much, frankly. They've certainly got a role and a stake in a lot of what happens at the municipal level, but ultimately the mayor and city hall will be the sort of guiding oar on a lot of this stuff. So I wouldn't expect to see them play a huge role in remaking what at least development in Midtown looks like. I think it's really a question of how the mayor can get people and the CEOs and the owners of these buildings and coming on their employees and to say, it's time to come back, or we're going to need you to come back to maintain some of the continuity and culture of the workplace. And ultimately, the more people that do, I think the better for restaurants, the better for infrastructure, the better for these sort of physical things we're used to seeing in our city.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's segue to something fun. Where can people find you if they want to hang out with Mr. Eric Phillips?
I'm not much fun to hang out with, but I live in the West Village and like to spend time on the park on the west side. And I have a ton of, I'm a big city bike rider, and like to do a lot of stuff in restaurants on Hudson and in Tribeca here on the west side. I don't like going uptown much. I'm not really an uptown guy. I like to stay sort of on my side of the island, and then in my quartile of the island, I'll call it.
How long have you lived there?
I've lived there for 2.5 years, and then I was kind of in central Greenwich Village for like by NYU for 10.
Mhm.
So in Brooklyn for a year. So it's kind of been I've been kind of a downtown all over guy, but it certainly is a great city.
Okay.
And people shouldn't believe all they hear on Washington Square Park or on all the subway dangers and things like that. I've traveled a good amount over the last couple of months, and people in other parts of the country have a real misconception of what New York looks and feels like right now. We have real public safety challenges, but we should all be mindful of creating some sort of false hellscape, projection that just isn't true, because the rest of the world is looking, and we need people from nearby states to other countries to visit this place and to help us on our recovery. So be mindful of it.
Well, that's a nice little PR message you got there because I don't know. I think I would argue with you. I think the city's pretty dangerous.
We've got a real crime problem that's concentrated mostly in some neighborhoods, and that's not okay. But we're still the safest big city in the world. We're still getting safer every day. The pandemic was a unique challenge to every big city in America. New York was not unique. And I think we're going to rebound faster from it than people expect, thanks to a lot of the good work by the NYPD, frankly.
Okay. Yep. NYPD and moderate Democrats. So thank you. Thank you, Eric Phillips, for being here with us on Politics NY with Sky, lifting the curtain. Stay tuned for more episodes with more fun people that are enlightened about city politics.
Thanks, Guy.